Benton, what you did for me. You changed my life, truly.
For decades, fans heard whispers about a painful secret from Sally Field's early life, but she never confirmed any of it. Until now. At 79, she's finally opening up, and what she revealed is both unsettling and deeply important. She didn't lay out every detail, but she did describe a moment at just 17 years old that changed her forever, a moment she kept buried for most of her life. And now, she says, there's a reason she can't stay quiet anymore. The childhood secret Sally never escaped. Sally Field's story begins on a quiet November day in 1946 in Pasadena, California. Life sounded simple on the surface, but it rarely felt that way. When she was just 4, her parents divorced, and a deep, constant anxiety settled over her like fog. In her memoir, In Pieces, she remembers spending hours in the school nurse's office, curled up on the cot, waiting for her mother to come save her. Nothing, not friends, not lessons, could pull her out of the dread that lived in her chest. Home didn't feel much safer. Her mother, also an actress, soon married a towering stuntman named Jock Mahoney. To young Sally, he was both magnetic and terrifying. Years later, talking to Oprah, she described the tangle of feelings perfectly. He was really big and handsome. I was both terrified of him and madly in love with him. That push and pull confusion followed her into adulthood. She found herself drawn only to men who made her feel both fear and adoration at the same time. In Pieces, Sally finally told the truth she had carried for decades. Jock Mahoney sexually abused her throughout her childhood. One of the memories that still haunts her happened when he would call her into his bedroom and ask her to walk on his back to ease his aches. He'd lie on his stomach at first, but then roll over, exposing himself. She wrote about tiptoeing up his chest in her nightgown, while his hands moved along her legs, whispering, "Lower, lower," as she tried to step away from where he was guiding her feet. It never crossed into rape, and that somehow made it more confusing. She asked herself, was that love? Was that because he loved me? The abuse stopped when she was 14, but the damage stayed far longer. Yet, in a twist that only life can write, Sally also credits her stepfather with saving her. Her mother and biological father were gentle, passive people who never rocked the boat. Jock was the opposite, cruel one minute, affectionate the next. That volatility forced something awake inside her. By 14 or 15, she was climbing onto the coffee table just to look her 6'4" stepfather in the eye and scream everything she felt. If she had swallowed the rage, she believes a part of her would have died. Those shouting matches became the only honest conversations they ever had, and she fought for her mother and older brother too. All of that pain had nowhere to go except outward. In high school, acting class became her lifeline. It wasn't about applause or attention. It was the one place she could let the real Sally breathe without punishment. Then, in 1964, at 17-year-old Sally got life-changing news. She was pregnant, right as she was about to film her first big role as the bubbly surfer girl Gidget. Fame was knocking, but so was a future she felt she wasn't ready for. With few options and even less support, she made the heartbreaking decision to end the pregnancy. A choice she carried quietly for decades, the turning point she never expected. Now, fresh out of high school, Sally Field was just 18. And standing at that crossroads most young adults know all too well. She enjoyed acting in school plays, but she didn't have some grand plan for Hollywood. Then, almost on impulse, she showed up to an open audition at Columbia Pictures. The studio needed a teenage girl for a new show, and that show turned out to be Gidget, the role that would launch her career. Picture her walking into that studio lot for the first time. She later admitted she felt completely out of her depth, surrounded by girls who looked more polished, more confident, and far more experienced. Part of her wanted to turn around and leave, but she stayed, even though it felt like the odds were stacked against her. Hundreds of girls showed up that day. By the time her turn came, Sally was so rattled she barely made it through the audition. She thought she had blown it, but something in her presence caught the attention of the Columbia executives. Out of everyone in that room, they chose her. That one moment changed everything, turning a shy teenager into the lead of a major sitcom. After Gidget wrapped in 1966, life moved fast. On screen, she played a carefree surfer girl. Off-screen, she found herself in a brief romance with Pete Duell, who played her character's brother-in-law. The tabloids spun it into something huge, but she kept it grounded. In a 1967 interview, she pushed back on the rumors, saying that people love to create marriages out of a few dates. For her, it was simply two young actors enjoying each other's company in a whirlwind industry. And while that early fame was still fresh, she popped up somewhere unexpected: the dating game. Before the show was known for celebrity guests, Sally took her turn as the one asking the questions. The episode aired in October 1966, just months after Gidget ended. Her three bachelors included her surfing coach from the show, an old high school classmate, and a restaurant manager she had never met. She asked them playful questions, including asking each bachelor to mimic a hilariously dramatic kiss. And in the end, she picked Bachelor number 3, the stranger. The prize was supposed to be an extravagant date capped with a helicopter ride. But years later, she revealed that she never went. She flat out refused, joking that he might have been the one. Career-wise, things were shifting. Gidget was canceled. Her first film was still waiting for release, and then she received a new script, The Flying Nun. At first, she said no. The character didn't feel right to her, and everything in her body told her to walk away. But her stepfather warned that turning it down might cost her future work. Fear made the decision, and she accepted, even though she sensed it wasn't the right move. The job turned out to be 3 difficult years. The show was a hit, but its concept became an easy target for jokes. Comedians mocked it constantly, and Sally couldn't always tell if they were laughing at the character or at her. It left her feeling humiliated, stuck in a role she didn't respect. Around the same time, she started spending time with Davy Jones from the Monkees. Magazine stories painted their relationship as casual, and Sally later described their first meeting at a pageant where he had crowned the winner. When they crossed paths again, they clicked immediately, sharing a sense of humor that helped lighten the pressure she felt. But she also revealed in her memoir that her interactions with the band weren't always so fun. She wrote about unwelcome comments and moments on set that left her uncomfortable, even trapped, until someone stepped in to help her. Despite the show's success, she felt miserable inside. Playing a character she saw as empty and unrealistic wore her down. One day, during filming, she reached a breaking point. In the middle of a scene with her co-star Madeline Sherwood, she simply collapsed onto the floor, overwhelmed and exhausted. Sherwood noticed. When Sally returned the next day, her co-star handed her a small piece of paper and told her firmly to show up at the address written on it the following Tuesday. No excuses. That address belonged to the actor's studio. Sally went. That decision marked the beginning of a transformation, one that would reshape her craft, her confidence, and ultimately her place in Hollywood. The transformation no one saw coming. When The Flying Nun wrapped in 1970, Sally Field didn't rush into another sitcom. Instead, she drifted through a mix of TV movies and guest spots, all while quietly sharpening her craft at the actor's studio under the guidance of Lee Strasberg. She was rebuilding herself from the inside out, trying to shed the image of the lightweight characters she'd been boxed into. Her next sitcom, The Girl with Something Extra, lasted only 1 season in 1973. When it ended, she made a firm decision. She shut the door on every TV offer that came her way. As she later explained, she had already been studying during her Flying Nun days, but now she committed fully. For 2 years, she immersed herself in the work, determined to break out of the typecasting that had followed her since her early 20s. That dedication paid off when she landed a role in Bob Rafelson's 1976 film, Stay Hungry. The movie, set in the world of bodybuilding, marked Arnold Schwarzenegger's first big Hollywood moment. And although Arnold naturally drew a lot of attention, Field's performance stood out for being sincere and grounded, nothing like the bubbly nun the audience thought they knew. She later described the unusual audition process for the film. According to her, Rafelson joked that he would only cast someone who was a good kisser, so she leaned in and kissed him. In her telling, it must have worked. Rafelson, however, denied the story, insisting he didn't require anyone to kiss him for a part. The real breakthrough came that same year with Sybil, a TV movie about a woman living with 16 distinct personalities. It was the kind of role that demanded everything she had trained for. Her performance won an Emmy and completely reshaped the way the public saw her. She joked to the New York Times that people were shocked she could go from the girl next door to someone that intense. But the role also came with unexpected commentary. As she told Oprah Winfrey, many viewers praised her acting, but called her ugly because of the character's appearance, something that weighed heavily on her. So when Burt Reynolds called offering her a role in Smokey and the Bandit, she was standing at a crossroads. She had proven she could be a serious actress, but she worried that audiences no longer saw her as attractive or fun. Competing with tall, glamorous women for movie roles made her doubt she fit the mold. Working with the biggest star in the world felt like a chance to shift how people viewed her. She hoped that if Reynolds thought she was appealing on screen, others might too. Smokey and the Bandit, released in 1977, became one of the defining movies of the decade. Reynolds played the Bandit, a charming outlaw behind the wheel, and Field played Carrie, a runaway bride who jumps into his car and into the chaos. The film was shaped by director Hal Needham, a stunt legend and one of Reynolds' closest friends. Needham had originally planned a small $1 million movie starring Jerry Reed, but once Reynolds showed interest, thanks to an open 6-week window in his schedule, everything changed. Studios didn't want Needham directing, and Reynolds' own friends begged him not to do the movie, but Needham pushed forward and ultimately secured $5.3 million. With Reynolds taking $1 million for his fee, the remaining budget forced Needham to be inventive. The gamble paid off. Smokey and the Bandit brought in more than $120 million, and Needham earned 3% of the profits. On screen, Field and Reynolds had easy chemistry. Off-screen, things were much more complicated. Years later, when asked about her worst on-screen kiss, Field didn't hesitate. She named Reynolds. She joked about the drooling and said it simply wasn't something he did well. But despite that awkward truth, their real relationship had already begun long before the movie even premiered. She later explained that she felt an instant spark the moment she met him on set. Her mother, Margaret Field, saw the relationship differently. She pulled Reynolds aside and told him to be gentle when things eventually ended. Reynolds admitted he didn't know how anyone could break a heart gently, but insisted he didn't intend to hurt her. Still, the warning hung in the background. Sally and Burt dated on and off for years. She described their bond as fun and easy, full of laughter despite the pressures around them. But their worlds didn't always move in harmony. Meanwhile, her career soared. In 1979, she played the title role in Norma Ray, the story of a factory worker who leads her co-workers in a fight to unionize. The performance earned her the Academy Award for Best Actress. Field was stunned when her name was called. She later said the moment felt unreal, like she was watching herself from somewhere outside her body. But none of it would have happened without the film's director, Martin Ritt, who had battled the studio on her behalf. He told her directly that other actresses had turned down the role, but he believed in her and would fight for her. And he did. Field continued working with Reynolds on films like Hooper and The End. But by the time they made Smokey and the Bandit the Sanu in 1980, their romance was already unraveling. They officially ended things in 1982, just as her career was reaching new heights. Later, she admitted that Reynolds wasn't a kind partner toward the end. While audiences loved the idea of their larger-than-life love story, what played out behind the scenes was far more tangled and far less romantic than anyone watching their movies could have imagined. You see, when Burt Reynolds first asked Sally Field to join the cast of Smokey and the Bandit, she couldn't understand why he was so eager to work with her. At the time, she was still seen as a television actress with just one feature film under her belt, fighting for a place in an industry that didn't quite take her seriously yet. This was years before the prestige roles that later defined her career. In her memoir, she reflected on how the power of Reynolds' fame shaped the way he interacted with everyone around him, often using that influence to keep control. Their romance began almost immediately. The day after she arrived on set, Reynolds asked her out, and the two were swept up in what she would later describe as an instant and overwhelming connection. Looking back, she called their bond a perfect match of flaws. She couldn't be honest with him, and she felt herself bending, shrinking, and changing just to keep the peace. She later admitted she began to disappear inside the relationship, molding herself into whatever version of herself she believed he wanted. When she finally told her story in her memoir, Field made it clear that the image the public saw in the late 1970s was nothing like the reality. She described their relationship as emotional, caring at times, but also confusing, painful, and deeply complicated. Reynolds, as she remembered it, demanded priority over her needs, her career, and even her identity. She wrote that she chipped away pieces of herself just to maintain the relationship, feeling trapped behind her own eyes, unable to speak freely. Marriage proposals were a recurring theme. Reynolds often insisted he wanted to settle down and start a family with her, but she turned him down every time. Some of those proposals, she said, felt more like pressure than romance. During the filming of Norma Ray, he showed up on set holding an engagement ring, clearly nervous, but even then she couldn't accept. The problems they refused to face were too big, especially the control he tried to exert over every part of her life. She recalled moments that left her anxious about running into any man she had known in the past, because Reynolds would immediately demand explanations. She remembered him gripping her face in his hands, interrogating her about who the man was and what history they had. He criticized her appearance so often that she resorted to wearing body makeup when he decided she looked too pale. Eventually, she admitted that she stopped existing as herself and moved through the world as someone shaped by his preferences, from how she dressed to how she walked. Reynolds later liked to believe he played a major role in shaping her career, even claiming he pushed her to take Norma Ray. Field recalled something very different. She said he dismissed the script outright, criticized the lead character, and insisted she was letting ambition control her. Their fight over the role became a major turning point for her, a moment when she chose her own instincts over his demands. It marked the beginning of her reclaiming her independence. That independence only grew once Norma Ray began gaining attention. Reynolds tried to discourage her from attending the Cannes Film Festival, convinced she wouldn't win anything. But she not only went, she won Best Actress. And when she received her first Oscar nomination, he was so resentful of the acclaim swirling around her that he refused to accompany her to the Academy Awards. She went with friends instead, and those same friends were there cheering beside her when she won her first Oscar. With everything she experienced, it's not surprising that she cut him out of her life once the relationship ended. She later said he simply wasn't good for her in any form. Over time, she recognized that she had been trying to repair something far older and far more painful, hoping that if she could make things work with Reynolds, she could somehow rewrite the damage caused by her stepfather's abuse. Eventually, she saw that wasn't possible. Reynolds, meanwhile, held on to their story long after it was over. In his memoir, he wrote that viewers of Smokey and the Bandit could literally watch two people fall in love on the screen. He dedicated an entire chapter to her and admitted he wasn't mature enough back then to handle the relationship well. He regretted the ways he hurt her, and he blamed himself for their collapse. He also admitted that his cheating had driven her away, and that losing her broke him in ways he couldn't undo. For decades, he referred to her as the love of his life. Even in his later years, he sent her postcards and notes, joking that he might start sending money just to get her attention. On a talk show, months before his death, he called her the one that got away. Though they no longer spoke, he kept in contact with one of her sons, who told him she still talked about him. Field didn't respond publicly at first. Later, she explained she had nothing she could say that belonged in the public eye. After Reynolds died, she shared a few careful thoughts. She acknowledged how flattering it was that he still spoke about her with such emotion, but she also called him complicated. She maintained her distance because, in her view, the relationship had been deeply unhealthy for her. She noted that Reynolds had rewritten their past in his mind, imagining she had meant more to him than she actually had. And yet, even with all the heartbreak, Field held space for the memories. She said there are certain chapters in life that never fade, no matter how many years pass. Her time with Reynolds was one of those chapters, full of joy, pain, conflict, and connection. She admitted that the years they shared would never leave her mind, and that he would always remain part of her history and her heart, no matter how complicated the story truly was. The diagnosis that changed everything. In 2005, Sally Field learned she was living with osteoporosis, a condition that slowly weakens the bones and makes them more vulnerable to fractures. The diagnosis came after a routine bone scan, and even though she hadn't felt any symptoms, the results revealed that her bone density had been thinning for years without any warning signs. She later reflected that, on paper, she fit the profile almost perfectly. Over 50, thin, small-framed, and carrying a family history of the disease through her mother and both grandmothers. Doctors explained that everyone naturally loses bone density with age, but osteoporosis speeds that process up dramatically. Once she knew what she was dealing with, Field made it a mission to protect her health. She shifted her daily habits, building a routine around calcium-rich foods, vitamins, and weight-bearing exercise. Those changes helped her stay ahead of possible complications, and despite the diagnosis, she hasn't faced any major fractures. Her experience pushed her into a new role, advocate. Field signed on for a series of campaigns promoting the osteoporosis medication Boniva. She admitted she was hesitant at first, but she saw real improvements and wanted women to understand that aging well wasn't just about appearance. It was about maintaining strength, confidence, and long-term health. The ads became so well known that they even sparked a parody on Saturday Night Live. But Field didn't stop at commercials. The weight of her diagnosis and the realization that so many women were walking around unaware of their own risks motivated her to speak out. On talk shows and in interviews, she urged older women to treat bone health like any other essential screening, encouraging them to get bone density tests just as routinely as Pap smears. She shared a statistic that shocked many. Half of all women over 50 will suffer a fracture related to osteoporosis, yet most never consider themselves at risk. To push awareness even further, she launched the Rally with Sally for Bone Health campaign. Through it, she championed early detection and education, emphasizing that even those who eat well, exercise, and take calcium, like she always had, can still be affected. She encouraged both men and women over 50 to get bone density scans, reminding people that osteoporosis doesn't just fit the stereotype of an elderly, hunched-over woman. In reality, it often develops silently, and many people never suspect they have it until it's too late. Her advocacy turned her personal diagnosis into a larger mission, empowering others to recognize the risks and take control of their bone health before the damage becomes irreversible. At 79, Sally Field finally confirms the rumors. Sally Field recently opened up about one of the darkest chapters of her life, sharing a story she carried in silence for decades. At 17, long before she became the beloved star of films like Mrs. Doubtfire and Forrest Gump, she went through an illegal abortion, an experience she says still sits heavy on her heart. She revealed the story in a deeply emotional Instagram video, speaking with the kind of honesty that almost feels like someone finally lifting the lid off a buried truth. Growing up in the 1950s, she explained that shame was woven into everything, especially topics like pregnancy and reproductive health. Even now, she admitted feeling that old conditioning tugging at her, which made her hesitant to speak about what she called her horrific story. What makes her experience even more haunting is the context. She described that period as worse than today, when contraception wasn't easily accessible and usually only available to married women. She said she feels a deep connection to the countless women of her generation who endured similar trauma, and thinking of them gives her strength. In her mind, those women, just like her, want to stand up for their children, their grandchildren, and the young women facing these battles now. Sally also painted a clear picture of where she was in life at the time. Fresh out of high school, with no college plans, no support system, and no money, she suddenly found herself pregnant. She felt completely cornered, and then came the moment that feels like something out of a tense, heartbreaking movie. A family friend, who happened to be a doctor, and his wife drove her and her mother all the way to Tijuana in their new Cadillac. They parked on a rough-looking street, 3 blocks away from the building where the procedure would take place. The doctor handed her an envelope of cash and sent her inside alone. The details she shared about what happened next were disturbing. She described the procedure, performed before Roe v. Wade, as hideous and life-altering. There was no anesthetic, only a few brief puffs of ether that left her arms and legs feeling strange, but did nothing to dull the pain. She felt every moment, and then, in the middle of that already unbearable situation, she realized the technician was molesting her. She talked about trying to force her numb arms to move just so she could push him away, describing the entire moment as a pit of shame. Once it was over, she was rushed out of the building as if it were on fire, reminded instantly that what she had just gone through was illegal. She made a point to acknowledge the family physician who helped her get there, calling his actions generous and brave. She explained that he risked everything, his career, his license, just by helping her. In her caption, she made it clear why she chose to speak now. She said reproductive rights are one of the reasons she supports Kamala Harris and Tim Walz, urging people to pay close attention to every race on the ballot, especially those involving reproductive freedom. Her message was simple but urgent. The country cannot go backward. She closed her post by offering her story with humility and strength, inviting others to share theirs if they felt able to do so.